Now, with reaction to today's announcement, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, good advice, bad advice?
Yeah, good advice. I think, look, I think what's important to remind, first, thanks for having me on to talk about this important topic. I think it's a good moment to remind people and the country that the vast majority of conservatives favor legal immigration, and we don't have a legal immigration system that works right now. And our problem with illegal immigration is that it undermines legal immigration. So we have 11 million people that are undocumented, and we understand that we have to deal with this issue because we have 11 million people that, by all accounts, are going to be here the rest of their lives with or without documents. But our objection has been in the past that we can't do anything to deal with 11 million people that, number one, is unfair to people who have done it, or number two, that will encourage illegal immigration in the future. And that's why your point is so important. And one of the things that I've made a key part of my own personal principles, I'm glad they found their way into these principles and must be a part of any final bill. And that is this, that before we can move towards a path for green cards, because citizenship comes after that. It's a path to green cards. Before we move to a path towards green cards, there has to be enforcement mechanisms that are verified and in place. And it's not just the border, Sean. It's workplace enforcement, because that's the magnet for illegal immigration. And it's tracking the entry and exit of visitor visas. 40% of our illegal immigration are undocumented people in this country entered legally and they overstayed their visas. And we don't track when people leave. So we don't even know who they are or where they are. All these things must happen before there is a path to a green card. I think that's a critical part of any component that we do here.
As I read the framework that was put out today earlier, Senator, it said simultaneously. So I wondered if people were playing games already politically.
No, let me explain that. I think
Sure.
I understand that. Yeah, here's what happens. When you're undocumented, you have to come forward. You have to identify yourself. You're going to be fingerprinted. You're going to have a background check done. You're going to have to pay taxes and fines. And what you get is a non-immigrant visa. That is not a green card. A non-immigrant visa means you have a work permit to stay in the country. You don't qualify for any federal benefits under that. Okay, you don't get federal benefits. During the same time, and they're going to have to stay in this process for a significant period of time. And while they're in that process is when all of this security stuff needs to happen. And after a number of years have gone by and the security enforcement stuff is in place, then the second phase begins, which is we give people the opportunity to apply for a green card the same way everybody else does, not a special way, the same way, which means you have to stand in line, you have to wait your turn behind everyone who applied before you legally, and when your turn comes up, you have to qualify for the visa that you're applying for. In essence, we are giving people the opportunity the chance to do this the way they should have done it to begin with. So that's why they say simultaneous, because while you're in that probationary period, that's when the enforcement stuff is happening.
So how long will this process ultimately take? And, for example, you said no federal benefits. You have to prove that you have a job. You have to go through a background check. I mean, so is it really going to be that stringent for people?
Well, that's why the details are so important of how you write it. You're absolutely right. This is a town where they write things that are called something, but that's not what it is. So it has to be important. Look, what I don't, you said something in your outline that is very important. I don't want to ever have to do this again. But that's what's going to happen if all we do is the legalization part and we don't do the enforcement part. And the only way that I know to incentivize the enforcement part is to say that the green card stuff doesn't even begin to happen until the enforcement happens first. That trigger is critically important. Otherwise, it will never happen. That's why we're where we are today, because when they did this in 1986, they did not do the enforcement, and that led to 11 million people. We'll be right back here again in 10 years or less if we don't do the enforcement.
So is that can I characterize that? If you don't get enforcement first or securing the borders first, is that a deal killer for you? And
oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because we'll be right back here again. I want to deal with this permanently. And by the way, I think the vast majority of people in both parties would agree with me on that point. No one ever wants to have to do this again. I mean, no one is happy about the fact that we have 11 million people here who are undocumented. This is something that should never, ever happen again. But the decisions that were made that led to this happened when I was in 9th grade. That was a long time ago, and now we have to deal with this so that it never happens again.
How do you respond to those people? I read the framework, and when you first explained it to me last week, and I spoke to you, I said this was the most interesting proposal that I had ever heard, because it seemed like you were really sincere in putting this to bed once and for all, and also it seemed like a very, very difficult process with a lot of penalties involved for not respect our laws and sovereignty. What do you say to people that say, well, ultimately, in the end, if people can get a green card, they can stay, that it's a backdoor form of amnesty? What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, the bottom line is that it would have been cheaper and easier for them to have done it the legal way than the way they're going to get it now. In essence, we're not creating an incentive and we're not rewarding it because, quite frankly, for many of these people, they would have been better off doing it the right way. This is going to cost them penalties. This is going to cost them taxes. This is going to cost them a significant wait. And then after they do all of that, the only thing they're going to have access to is the opportunity to apply for a green card. You still have to qualify for the visa you're applying for. So they would have been better off doing it the right way from the beginning. Amnesty, different from the proposal in 2007 that created a brand new thing called a Z visa, which basically was a blanket, and you had to do very little to qualify for it. So look, the reason, this is not, we're not trying to punish anybody here. This is not about that we're angry at immigrants. This is about the fact that we don't want this to ever happen again, and we don't want to be unfair to the people that have done it the right way. Sean, I have hundreds of people a month come to our offices to talk about the fact that they have family members that are waiting in line to come here the right way. Our message to them cannot be, come illegally because it's cheaper and quicker. On the other hand, this is the reality. We have 11 million human beings in this country that are going to be here for the rest of their lives. We have to solve that problem in a way that takes care of it.
And they go to the back of the line. That's part of that will be part of the legislation, correct?
Not only do they, yes, and not only do they go into the back of the line and wait behind everybody who applied before them the right way, but when their turn comes up, they have to qualify for the visa they're applying for, not a special pathway.
And there's going to be a lot of penalties and security checks and a lot of other. I will say this, Senator, it's the most thoughtful proposal that I have heard, and you've explained it better than anybody. But the devil will be in the details. And to me, I agree with you that if they don't secure the border first, there's no point because we're going to be back debating it in 5 years.
That's correct.
All right, Senator, thanks so much for clarifying and appreciate it. Wish you best of luck on this process as we move forward.
Thank you, Sean.
And coming up, if you